So I want to talk about the music production process for beginners. I'm going to break it down into several areas and I'm going to talk you through what the different stages are in terms of producing an entire track ready to be shared. So believe it or not, the first thing that you need to get down is having an idea. Actually, you need to have several ideas, and a lot of people might not think that is as important, but the last thing you want to do is sit in a session and be ready to do some recording or create something awesome, and all of a sudden your brain just goes dead, and that's called a creative block. My suggestion is to actually have several ideas pre-done. So you're gonna have to record your ideas as you go, as you're out and about. I actually use my mobile phone to record stuff. So whether it's something spontaneous that's just come to my head and I have to beatbox it, or I have to hum it, or whatever the case might be, at least I've got the idea down, because you don't want to forget when you get home or when you get to wherever you get into. You will forget. You may remember some of it, but you might not get it exactly as you first conceived the idea. And so have your ideas down and make sure you have a bunch of them, so when you do sit down in a session, you have a few things to go through. You also need to start listening to music analytically. So start listening to tracks that you like and see what in those tracks actually make it sound so good, whether it's the arrangement, whether it's the use of various instruments together. See what instruments they're actually using and how they use them in conjunction with each other, and see where each individual instrument sits and how they occupy their own space and things like that. Just little technical things that you would want to learn for yourself. Listen to commercial tracks and just see how they arrange these tracks and what they use in these tracks to actually make them so awesome in terms of sound. Take inspiration as well from other things around you. Listen to sounds out there in the environment. These are just one or two of many ways you can actually start with an idea and come up with something quite unique. So once you've got your ideas, the next thing you want to do is plan a session where you've sat down and you're ready to actually be creative. What you want to do is start going through the sounds to begin with in your recording software. Most of the sounds that come in the library of your DAW software are actually quite good. So you want to have those as a starting point. Just find ones that actually complement each other. You don't want sounds that are clashing. You want sounds that are actually going to occupy their own space in terms of the frequency spectrum. This is something that I think about when I am actually choosing my sounds, because I don't want to have too much work to do in the mixing phase. Once you've come up with a few sounds, actually try and keep it simple. And if you try to be overcomplicated with the sounds that you choose or the number of sounds that you choose, it can really become a headache for you. Think about it as a band. The main elements are going to be your drums, your guitar, your bass, your keys, or some other melodic kind of instrument. Just keep it simple and pick some sounds that work well together. Once you've got your sounds that you want to use, you might want to start recording short clips, but record multiple clips, so that way you have choices when you get to the arrangement stage as to what to choose to see what works well to put together an entire song. Once the recording of the clips have been completed, the next thing you want to look at is now arranging the song. Now the arrangement is where you actually decide how the song is going to be laid out in a timeline. So the start of the song, the middle and the end, every song has that pretty much. So I've got a song that I've worked on, a track that I've worked on previously, and it's just to give you an idea as to how things would look in an arrangement window. Now this is Ableton Live, and this is how it would be pretty much laid out in all the other DAW softwares as well. The only difference with Ableton, as far as I know, is that it's got another screen that you can actually record in before you bring the clips into the arrangement view here. These are all the clips that I've recorded previously. The ones that are grayed out are basically ones that I'm not actually going to use, so I've disabled them, and then I'll just toggle back to the arrangement view. So what I would have done is I would have copied across all those clips into this window here, starting from left to right, to create, as you can see, there's a timeline sort of thing going on here. It has the time, so it goes up to about 3 minutes and 10 seconds in this track, and if you go through the various areas like I've highlighted here, you'd see how things are arranged in terms of what instruments I've actually brought in. What you don't want to do is to bring in every single instrument at the same time, because your song will become very stale and very boring very quickly. So you want to start introducing elements as you go along, so various sounds and various instruments starts kicking in as the song progresses. Now this track here, or this song, has actually about 14 tracks in there, and what you'll see is that I've only actually started off with 3 tracks, so 3 individual instruments at the intro section. So this is the start of the song, and if I just play this little clip back here, it's a little bit low, so let me just turn this up a bit. So now it kicks in with another couple of instruments and the drums. So pretty much you need to start introducing things as you go along. That's the main thing, and you'll get to various points when you want to take away stuff as well. But anyway, let me just explain what's going on before I get too deep into it. So I've got the intro section here, then I've got a little section where I've got the samples going on, the vocal samples, which is kind of like being used as a hook. And then it drops off the vocals here. There's nothing there with the vocal samples in this section, and that could be a verse. So typically you'd have like an intro, a hook or chorus, a verse, then you may have a breakdown, which is where you take away a lot of the sounds and you just leave the bare minimum. And the idea is for you to kind of build up some more tension, for you to then drop the main hook again, or drop the main instruments again. So, I mean, the arrangement is dependent on the type of song you're working with and what you want to go for. So there's no real hard and fast rules. It just depends on what works for you and what works for the idea that you have. Once you've actually arranged the track, as you can see here, this is all arranged. The next thing that you would want to do is go on to the mixing stage. So looking at the mixing phase now, with mixing what you do is actually balance the sounds. Now a lot of people might think mixing is where you throw a bit, a bunch of effects and a bunch of plugins on your instruments or your tracks to make them sound awesome, but it's like cooking. You don't want to be overspicing your food, otherwise it's just going to taste horrible. You want to make sure you do things in a subtle way, and you start with the basics and get the basics right first, and then you see at that point whether or not you need to add anything else to enhance a sound or to correct something. So at the basic level, mixing comes down to balancing your levels, moving these sliders, these faders. So on a mixing console, you'd want to actually probably bring everything down to a certain level, and then you start bringing them up one by one to kind of hear how they sound in context with each other, and not turn everything up to the full blast to begin with. So once you've mastered the art of mixing, and you get your songs and your tracks sounding awesome, then you don't necessarily need to add a whole bunch of plugins to do anything. The main things are levels, making sure that your faders are at the right levels in the context of the whole thing, with how they play against the other instruments. You also want to do some panning. I don't have a whole bunch of panning going on here, but panning is really going left to right in terms of having a stereo image going on. So you might have some instruments coming out of one side of the speakers, or one channel of sound, so the right or the left side, and then you have other instruments coming out the other side, and some coming down the middle. So that gives the effect of being in front of a live band, if you will, and actually listening back to a live band in front of you, where you've got the various instruments scattered. Everyone's actually in a different direction, and you're going to hear the sound from a different angle each time. So mixing is all about balance and getting the levels right, as far as I'm concerned. Then the other element would be to add some sizzle by adding some effects like reverb and some delay to some things, to make them sound a bit different and to make them sound a bit more roomy.